Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Yo Mama. Now, let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome, everybody, to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Layer of Love. See which sexy singles go into the layer and find their fairy tale ending. Watch Layer of Love on DVD now. Welcome, everybody, to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're filmmakers, writer, director, actors, voiceover artists, a bunch of things, musician, producer. Man, so much goes into this. And it's funny, we were talking before the show about the process, the creative process. I think I've heard, and I don't want to assign a name to it, but we use all of this kind of stuff in order to look at movies. We also review films. We'll come back to that idea here in a second. But it's just an interesting conversation, though, about the creative process, because we're in post right now on a short film I shot in January, and you're going to be doing the music for it. You're working on the score alongside friend of the show, Scott Garrett Graham, and you're doing a lot of spearheading right now because he's on tour. And we were just talking, you were like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I was like, you know what? Nobody knows what they're doing in this business. Like, every film, you're basically starting over again. Like, everything is its own specific thing. And every time you go to create it, you're starting over from scratch. You're writing a new script. Even if it's a sequel, you need to figure out, okay, well, what are these characters doing now? And how should, whatever, the sound design, impact that story? How should the score reflect, their new journey now? Like, you can rinse and repeat that stuff if you want. I mean, danger, because you're going to end up with something that you're probably not as satisfied with. But you're always starting over. And part of that process we were talking about is placeholders, the idea of a placeholder. I do this in screenplay writing often. Sometimes I'll even leave it all the way through my shooting script, where I'm like, this is dialogue as a placeholder. I don't want this to be the actual thing. I want to work with my actor to figure out what's a better way to say this. This is a simple, dumb way to say it. What's a more interesting, organic way that fits the situation and you as an actor, in a way that's also going to get something out of your co-stars. And then in your case, you're working on music and you're like, yeah, this is a cue. I just want to make sure everyone knows this is just a cue. We'll come back to it. I don't know what it is yet. I got a bunch of other ideas I got to get to first. And so placeholders are an interesting idea and concept in the iterating and creative process. Yeah, that's a question. I think. Yeah.
Process?
Question mark?
Yeah, with this, I'm just trying, well, first off, just watching it for, overall feel and then, and vibe, and thinking, okay, what kind of sounds could get me something close to that? Or should I start looking for or making? And then once I have that kind of idea, just start going fast and trying to make something immediately, because like I found the more time that I spend on something, the less less right it is, or like creative it kind of is, because I'm just beating to death, okay, this needs to sound bigger, or this needs to whatever. Just get the idea in there, and then you can always come back to it and make it what it should be. But so with your film, I just knew at the beginning it needed to feel, a certain way. It needed to feel like there was whether it needed to feel small in moments, or we needed to have some kind of dynamic thing happen at some point. Just kind of going along with what I'm seeing. I wasn't even timing anything out. I was just make something, and then put it in there. And then it just so happened, like in this intro section, I swear, I'm not even lying. It just so happened that some of these like intense moments happened on cuts, and I didn't intend for that. And it happened, and I saw it, and I was like, oh my gosh, that totally works. Or it was just a little bit off, and I'd be like, okay, if I just nudge this a little bit, this is exactly what this needs to be in this moment. And there's no, I'm not very good at just like making something perfect as is, oh yeah, this is perfect timing and this is exactly what I want. I just got to kind of make stuff and then see if it works or see if it's close and then kind of tweak it, get inspired by my inspiration, and then, for other sections in your film, I'm trying to get inspiration externally as well, not just, be internal with it. And there's a couple of things that I've been watching that are kind of inspiring me, and other things I'm listening to that are kind of inspiring me as well. And so I have a direction. I still don't know what it is. I still don't have even a skeleton, but I have a direction. And
just what I want to hear. No, I'm just playing.
Yeah, exactly.
That is actually what I want to hear.
Yeah. And then we'll just see what happens, Yeah. So it's been a lot of fun. And then, me, when I get into something, I like eventually spending a lot of time on it. And so I am doing that. But at first, the initial kind of idea dump needs to be fast. Yeah. Cause then also you don't want to sink 20 hours into something that doesn't work, sinking 4 or 5, sure. But like, I don't want to spend, 3 days working on something and then you're like, this is not at all. but once I had the intro that I listened to it and I watched this intro and I thought, I love this. I think this is great. I was fine with spending more time on it to make it good enough to share with you, and that was an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Where, I had this piece and I shared it with Scott and he liked it, but I thought, okay, do I like it? And I watched it from the point of view of just a watcher, just like somebody who's watching this piece, this film. And I thought, man, I really like this. Like I would watch this film and be like, who scored that? And as long as I feel that, even if you hated it, I was fine with spending another 10 hours or however long, 6 hours, getting it to a place where I was like comfortable sharing it with you. Like the idea is here and the idea is 80% there, 90% there. Yes, we'll make some changes and tweaks to make it exactly what you need it to be for the story. But if it was just that, man, I'm proud of it. As long as I felt like that, I was okay with sharing it with you. And that's when I did.
That's awesome. That's a really cool feeling. I like what you said, a number of things. One, the idea of getting inspired by your inspiration. Like those are really cool moments when you're like, oh man, that idea kind of worked. What else can I do? And suddenly it just builds on itself. There's momentum there. The other thing that I love that you said is that it's a happy accident. Like you laid it all out before even looking at the reels, and you're like, oh man, this thing that I built separately like is lining up like 70-80%. If I just do this and this, I find a lot of editing works that way for me. Whenever you're cutting something, whether it's a product video or a short film, all these things have their own rhythm to it. And then what I find so often is I add a music track, and like 70% of it is just syncing somehow. It's like a weird magic. And it's like, oh, you know what? If I just go and trim whatever 3 frames here, 6 frames there, suddenly everything is just popping when it should pop. And then also creating rhythms that are just for the edit. Because we've talked a lot about, Mickey Mouse editing where everything is happening on the beat. That gets exhausting for a viewer. And so you need to create different kinds of rhythms at different times in order to make sure people are engaging with the story, not with your music. Those are 2 different ideas. And so, but happy accidents are the best whenever you just find something purely by coincidence, and then that inspires you to be like, oh, that gives me so many other ideas. And it just kind of goes back to what we started with, which is no one knows what they're doing. Like we're all just figuring it out.
It's so funny. I was just going to say that I don't think that anybody ever plans those kinds of things, and no one will know it either.
It looks intentional.
Like it's just me and you sitting here talking about this and me telling you this kind of synced up and I didn't mean for it to. No one in the history of it forever will ever know that, it's just this cool thing that we know that happened. I think that's lovely. It's just like a little secret.
Because I didn't know watching it. I was like, oh yeah, bro.
Yeah, cool. And honestly, I'm so happy that you like it, because I hold like you have great taste, and that's one of the reasons why we do this podcast and where we've been doing it for this long, is because I just really respect your taste. And when you like something, I know that you say it, I know that you actually do. And I can tell, there's sometimes also where you're just nice about things, and I can tell that too. And I feel like you actually like this, and it like aligns with your vision. And yes, it might not be perfect now, but it will be, like it's there,
I can't wait to get to the end of it so that I can show you the temp. Cause I did a bunch of temp scoring just to have something, but Todd and I agreed at the outset, because I offered it to you and you're like, no, I don't want to hear the temp. I just want to create based on purely what I'm seeing, so that that whole creative process doesn't get tainted with someone else's music and taste. And I want to explore and create on, without any of that. And so I'm really like, it's going to be really funny to see your reaction to like, oh, yep, I get it.
Yeah.
And then some of the nightmare at the end is just like, oh God, yeah, those are just weird choices, Wes, because it's all just cues for me. Like, that's a cue. Again, placeholder kind of ideology at work. Yeah.
Cool, man. I'm looking forward to that.
Nice. Well, I don't know. Speaking of placeholders and returning to it whenever you can, what are we covering today, man? Yeah.
Nice. I don't know how you do it like that. Nice. Oh, man. Today we are covering Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, which 2016, 17, something like that.
17.
Not the original, but so if you haven't seen that film, the one with The Rock, please pause this episode, go watch it. I believe it's streaming on Hulu now, because we're going to spoil a bunch of stuff.
So many things. We will look at some of the cinematography very lightly, shooting night for night instead of day for night, which is always a tempting thing to do for a lot of reasons that I'll dive into, as well as a lot about the story and writing, physical comedy, the character arcs, for sure, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. 4 teenagers are sucked into a magical video game, and the only way they can escape is to work together to finish the game. It's directed by Jake Kasdan, screenplay by Chris McKenna and Erik Sommers, and Scott Rosenberg and Jeff Pinkner. Cinematography by Gyula Pados, featuring Dwayne Johnson as Spencer, Kevin Hart as Fridge, Karen Gillan as Martha, Jack Black as Bethany, Nick Jonas as Alex, and Bobby Canavale as Van Pelt.
Okay, this is what I'm good at. Playing video games. It's what I do. It's literally the main thing that I do. Play a game like this, there's gonna be levels. In order to finish the game, you gotta complete all the levels. Levels are gonna get harder as we go along. We complete the levels.
Spencer, do you even know where we're going?
Kinda.
Kind of? Oh, that's good then. We're in good hands.
Okay, the missing piece, I'm guessing.
Oh my God, that must be what we're looking for, the missing piece of the map.
But the problem is, there's nothing here.
What do you mean there's nothing there? It's a map, just like you said. It's a map of Jumanji.
Cartography,
What's that?
the study of maps. It was one of Professor Oberon's skills.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, so you can't see this, but I can?
The characters we chose, we all have certain skills. So there's gotta be a way to access our...
Oh!
What'd you just do?
Strengths, fearless, climbing, speed, boomerang, smoldering intensity.
The hell are you doing?
What just happened?
You just smoldered.
Weakness. None?
How'd you do that? That list?
Well, I think I just pressed my enormous left pec.
Yeah, it's like the boob area. Let me show you.
Get the hell away from me.
At least press it in front of us so we know exactly how to...
Strengths, karate, tai chi, aikido, dance fighting. Dance fighting? Is that even a thing? Weakness, venom.
Seriously. Paleontology, what does that even mean?
Study of fossils, I think. That's kind of cool.
Says the gorgeous karate badass to the old fossil guy who doesn't have any endurance.
I hate this game.
Weakness? Cake.
Yes, cake is my weakness, along with speed and strength.
Huh.
Strength is my weakness. Hey, quick question. How is strength my weakness? Somebody explain that to me. And why would I need speed? Why would I need to be fast when I'm being chased by an enormous killer zebra or some shit in this dumbass hat?
You're also a good weapons valet.
What does that mean?
Well, I think it means you carry my weapons in your backpack and you give them to me when and if I need them.
So many things. Hold on. Where's the stop sharing button? Get. Dude, isn't it kind of dicey to make a sequel / reboot of a Robin Williams film 23 years later? And how did that turn out for them?
Yeah, I love this movie. I loved it from the very beginning, and I still love it. And the reason we're doing it is because the other week I told you that we recently watched it with my kids, and I was laughing out loud. Like, it's so well written. So, I mean, look, there's 4 writers on this script, and I think that that's exactly what this script needed. It needed multiple people to look at it and say, how can we make this different, updated, like as in like today, still pay homage to the original, and look at it from a new lens, and have little moments that happen that you don't expect as well. And they did all of that in spades. I mean, from the call out, the Alan Parrish call out
Yes.
in the hut, which I thought was just lovely and beautiful and brilliant. It's an homage to the late great Robin Williams, because he played Alan Parrish in the original, and they didn't need to do that, but I think they did, and they did it just beautifully. It's just a mention, and if you don't know that, it's only a few seconds, so they don't beat it over your head and like make it a whole section of the movie. You just get this zoom in of the Alan Parrish was here on the wood, and it's a single question, and then you move on.
And then I will add, now that you're pointing this out, because they follow it up with, like, who was Alan Parrish? Oh, he built this. I'm just living in it. And I feel like that's a hat tip to this movie itself. Like, he really built this thing, and we're all just kind of living in it.
Yes. Great.
Pretty cool.
Great point. I forgot about the follow-up. Yes, that's really it. The casting is absolutely flawless in this movie. Just, come on. It is by far the best live action role that The Rock has ever done.
Yeah.
Easily for me. There is nothing, like, all the serious stuff is just shit. Like, I love you, Rock. You're fantastic. You are a American hero for sure. You absolutely
keep watching every film you make. Don't worry.
Yes, 100%. But the comedic tension is you are fantastic at it. Like, it's just perfect. And you and Kevin Hart together is a match made in heaven. I will never not watch that. I will take my money, please. Double the price of the ticket, and I will go watch it in a theater easily. A third one, can't wait for it. And then Jack Black playing a girl, he was just perfect at it, because you can overdo that real easily to where you just become kind of almost homosexual in your performance. And he was never that. I like saw him as a female in a lot of ways, like just the way he delivered these lines, his shock at a penis and what it does is fantastic. Him asking Kevin Hart to help him pee, that scene, and Kevin Hart's response of like, yeah, sure. They took their time. They stayed on him for a good 30 seconds as he responded. They didn't cut or anything. And I can only imagine how much fun it was on set to make this movie. I mean, In fact, this morning I was rewatching it with Simon, and he wanted to watch bloopers, and so we looked up some bloopers, and they're just gold. They're almost better than the movie itself. It's just so good to watch these guys crack up trying to deliver serious lines about things. I love the fact that they made it a video game now instead of a board game. Of course, everything's video games now. And that, but the pièce de résistance or whatever you want to call it, the best part for me was that, and I didn't remember this, at the end when they find out that Van Pelt
or Alex, I'm sorry. Yeah. That Alex came back to his original time and that he had lived his whole life for those 20 years. I forgot about that. And I almost like I had an emotional response to it. I was like, cause he was they established in him finding out that he's been there for 20 years, his distraughtness, like, even if it's just for a few seconds, and so they let him have his moment of just, trying to soak it in. But then they didn't just cut away from it. The Rock stood over him and said, "Hey, we're going to get you home." They let it kind of breathe. They didn't belabor it, but they gave it its due time so that you really felt for him, not just him finding out, but the characters around him felt for him too. And so then us as viewers felt for him. So then at the end, we find out he has his whole life and he's got a kid now, and they're standing there and they're happy for him. And Bethany is happy for him because, she was like super into him. Bethany is happy for him and everything. And, it's just an emotional thing. I loved that. I thought it was so good because then it also helps them because they as characters are also experiencing this time dilation kind of thing where, they could be in there for what they think is 3 days, but really it's 3 years or something. But now we know they're going to go right back to the same time they left. So they could essentially be here for weeks and it doesn't matter. So we established this in a smart way, that time doesn't really matter here, So anyway, that is brilliant. And I love that. I love that I love the stakes of the film and that they could die at any moment, or that after they die 3 times, they could come back. I obviously love that. And I got this before Jumanji, by the way, right,
my tattoo.
Right.
Just let me point that out.
Still on your first life. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. But that stuff keeps happening that thwarts them. For example, on the helicopter, when they're trying to get away from the rhinos and the Rock has to fix the helicopter so that they can fly up and out of the ravine. He fixes the helicopter, they get it, they fly away and everything, and Kevin drops the stone and they have to go back to get the stone. And what's the cost of that? Well, the Rock has to throw Kevin out of the helicopter to get the rhinos away from the stone. So he loses a life. And they make it funny about that, but it's just another thing that went wrong, that they have to overcome. And then it's just hilarious the entire time, giving cake as a weakness and then him exploding, just so good. And they bring that back in the next movies, like a bunch of this stuff back in the next movies too. So it's not all forgotten. But this one in particular, I just think is a winner in all the ways. The writing is fantastic. The acting is fantastic. Directing is fantastic. The set design is wonderful. The CGI is really great. I think you also get away with a lot because this is a video game world, quote unquote, air quotes. I'm air quoting right now. So, an elephant can look a little not exactly real as long as it looks real enough to us. And I buy it because I know this is a video game.
Exactly. You can do so much more with being over the top, right? People can fly out of frame and, what's her name? Martha can do silly, backflips onto
Yes.
A landing pad. And it doesn't need to look perfect because we all know this is a video game, so you can get away with being hyper stylized. But then that hippo is incredible. Like, my God, like they're still not like going so far away from realism that it makes you also lean away. Like, it's a really fine line they're walking in this entire film and nailing it.
Yeah, I think what they're taking over the top in these, like the animals, is their movement, you know? So like the hippo's movement is over the top. That hippo is not, hippos are not that, I mean, they're very fast, but they're not, like when what's his name? Bethany, when Bethany gets eaten by the hippo at the beginning, yes, hippos are very aggressive and they're very fast when they run, but they don't eat like that. Like, not going to just bite him over the head and then swallow him whole, you know, but they over the top the movements for the animals, but the rest of it seems very accurate, and they put a lot of time in the CGI. Anyway, and then having Nigel in there is fantastic as well, you know, like, and the fact that he just repeats himself, because that's what an NPC would do, and they explain that, and even if you don't play video games, you learn enough through the exposition to know what's going on, but they don't they make the exposition funny, you know, that's how they don't over belabor it and make me feel like an idiot. It's them finding out, you get a little exposition in a funny way, because Kevin Hart can't open his mouth without being funny. I'm not even exaggerating. The dude is hilarious in this film. And then you get in and get out, you know, like the cut scene at the beginning where he reads the note. What's happening? It's a cut scene. It's just explaining what what happened before or something. And that's it. And then we get into the story. I also like to point out that Nigel is a badass. Nigel saved Jumanji. Because if he hadn't stole the stone in the first place to give it to the Rock, we wouldn't even be here. So Nigel's awesome. Anyway, just wanted to call that out.
That's a great point, actually. Yeah. I was going to just tack on to your comment about the cutscene, which is just genius. What a great use of video game terminology and aesthetics, and just a practical thing that happens in most video games since, you know, the late 90s. And just inserting it, like, we need exposition, we're going to lean all the way in and use the combination of exposition that is natural and inherent to video games, and then call it out. You know, our actors, the characters themselves, are going to acknowledge what's happening, and we're not going to dance around it. We need this in order to understand the context of the story that the character is now going to be playing through. It's just a really, really smart written film. Dude, I didn't watch this for years until after it came out, because I just don't really like comedies in general. Like, they're just exhausting. If they're funny at all, it's going to stop being funny after the first 20, 30 minutes. It's hard to keep humor going for an extended amount of time. And this goes for 2 hours. And what an incredible use of runtime. Because, like you pointed out, like the moment with Alex is a down moment. And it's one of those, like, we can bring the emotions down so that we can now kind of refresh some space for humor. And they use the action the same way. Like, okay, the action will be funny sometimes, and then sometimes it's just really cool. And those moments that it's just cool is kind of a emotional reset for the audience. Like, okay, we're going to be flying around in this helicopter. It's going to be really tense as Spencer is on top trying to fix it. Like, there's no comedy that's happening right there. And it's just there to engage your tension. And once you have tension, now you can use humor to cut through that tension. Like, we need that. We're looking for humor to cut through this moment of tension. And this whole film is just a masterclass of writing, let alone, and I think everyone has something to do with this story. I mean, the writers are certainly like laying the foundation, but every actor that's walking in, they all have to figure out a way to work together in a particular scene to figure out, okay, what's the tone of this scene? We see where the jokes are, but that doesn't mean we have to be screaming. Like, is this a screaming moment, or is this a subtle, simple moment? And they're working through that, I think, together, because you get to the end of the film and there's so much tension, there's so much momentum, and I can imagine some of these lines would be shouted, but yet you have Karen Gillan and Dwayne Johnson looking at each other and saying, no, this is a moment for whenever the elephant, fridge comes through on the elephant, zoologist, bitch. And then the stone gets flung across the mountaintop. And then the elephant, loses control and, storms past. And there's this great moment where Martha and Spencer look at each other. And in that moment, Dwayne Johnson and Karen Gillan can play that a multitude of ways. They can say, this is an exciting moment. We know what to do. The elephant, start the climb. Like, you can play it with that level of excitement, but that's not what they do. They're like, oh, no. I think the tone here, we're standing right next to each other. We don't need to shout. This is a moment of realization. Let's play the realization, not the excitement. And that's what they do. She just looks at him, and then I bet this is exactly what's written in the script. It's just elephant. And he looks at her, start the climb. And then they go. Like, it feels like the starting blocks before the gunshot goes off. Like, we're resetting the emotional, level of this new section, this last final sequence. Let's start low, and then we'll have something to build on as the rest of the sequence plays out. And it's just beautiful. Like, I feel like the entire movie's like that. Every single scene is being considered again as they enter it. Like, okay, how are we starting it? How can we start low so that we can build and figure out a way to not lose track? This movie has no right to be as good as it is. It's so good. And the whole way, I was just sold pretty quick. The intro was a little bumpy my first time. I think I watched this after the sequel came out even, and was just like, okay, all right, I see where this is going. And it's not very funny. Like, there's some moments where you're like, okay, that's kind of humorous. It's not really until you get into the video game that everything comes to life. And then on my second viewing, which was, yesterday, I was in from the beginning because I knew where this is going. I was like, suddenly I enjoyed that intro so much more because I'm like, okay, these characters are really doing something, and they're laying the foundation for, the headliners, because you need that. And I'll dive into that here in a minute, but it's just so well built, because what do you get? Maybe 20 minutes total with those kids at the beginning and the end of the movie. That's a lot of heavy lifting in the writing and in the performances to make sure you build all that contrast. And you need to make sure they pop and shine through once you have Dwayne Johnson playing a skinny nerd. Like, you got to give that guy a lot of space to operate. And they do it in that. It's such an efficient use of the runtime, because we're here to watch Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart and Karen Gillan and Jack Black. That's what you buy the ticket for. You don't want to spend 45 minutes. Well, you'd prefer not to. At the end of the day, I think if that's what they needed, that's what they would have done. The brilliance of this movie is they didn't need to do that because of how strong the writing and performances were. Very tight. And to your point, you get to the end of the film, I was in tears. I was in actual, oh my God, yes, Bethany, you found someone that you didn't need to attract with your body. For her, that's a big moment. And for, I forgot to write that actor's name down. This, guy walks on set and he has to now connect with everyone. Oh, you're you and you're you. And it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
20, because he came in 96. This came out, and I don't remember if they were playing it like it was 2017, but it came out, 20, 21 years, and he has to play this character who's still kind of this ex-rocker guy who's now a grown-up dad. And he's nailing it, and all the characters are nailing the emotion. It's such a wonderful moment, to your point about, oh, he got to live that whole 20 years. It just sucks you in. It doesn't have a right to be that good at the end of a comedy. What? And I love the performances were so good. I would say And this would probably be my favorite performance by The Rock. Like, he is doing the most acting of his career in this kind of silly throwaway comedy, if you will. Because he's really channeling his character of Spencer. Like, he does a really, really strong job of being insecure and afraid. I think he could be a bit more uncomfortable in his body. Like, I think he owns his body a little too easily for 80% of the time. There's still a few moments where he's not. Like, there's that moment between him and the fridge on the cliff. And the fridge is like starting to challenge him because the fridge still feels like he's the fridge, even though he's in Kevin Hart's body. And in those moments, The Rock does a really good job of just kind of cowering down and like really taking his time to hit his beats, which is great. They don't have a lot of that in this film. This movie is really like pop, 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 pop. But they find those little moments to breathe. One of them you pointed out where the fridge is like digesting, do I help this girl figure out how to pee in a man's body? And he's just going through those beats and he takes his time. That's a great use of breathing time. And The Rock does the same thing as Spencer whenever he's figuring out a way to challenge the fridge in The Rock's body. That's a great use of like him figuring out how to be a man. But I do think there's other moments that The Rock could have been a little bit more hunched over or an insecure instead of like the smoldering thing. Yeah, it's a fine balance because at the end of the day, he is still a video game character. And so walking around as a video game character, you just are. Like, they just know that information in their heads. He's just a zoologist. And so there is a balance there, and I don't think he got it necessarily wrong. I just think there's a few more moments he could have been a little more Spencer-y. But that said, he freaking crushes it. I think this is his best role where he's not being The Rock. Because a lot of his mannerisms are very Spencer. Like the way he says things, the way he's trying to look at her in the eye, Martha, without look her in the eye. Like, so many great moments of figuring out how to be a leader. And pretending to be a leader, but then like, okay, don't cry. Like, he's wonderful job. I think Kevin Hart is probably the weakest in terms of just, he's funny, but I don't see the fridge at all in his performance. He is just being Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart is being the most Kevin Hart of his life. And thank God for it because it's so good. Yeah. I don't want him to change a thing. And Jack Black, you've already touched on it, like, just so good. And I didn't think about it, but you're right. If he leans too far into it, suddenly he does begin to just kind of present as a stereotypical kind of effeminate gay personality instead of a girl trapped in a guy's body. That's so much more interesting and nuanced, and Jack Black crushes it. And then Karen Gillan, aside from maybe Bobby Canavale, is probably the best actor in the movie, like as just a pure actor. She's probably the best. She would go toe to toe with Bobby Canavale. I can never remember how to pronounce his last name. Yeah. But because he is an incredible actor. But she and him together are, outclassing everyone. As far as you go through their catalogs, their library of films they've done, you'll see so much more range. But all of those people together, what I didn't know until the credits was that Alex was a Jonas.
Oh, what? You didn't know that?
Had no idea. I'm just completely unaware of those guys as, I don't know, are they singers? What their deal is? But I literally thought it's really cool that some random actor got a shot to be in this film. Like, that had to be, I was literally having these thoughts. That had to be the coolest moment in this guy's life. He just gets to walk on set and be surrounded with incredible talent. And he held his own. Like, good job, bro.
Good job.
It's a Jonas brother. I guess go figure. Yes, but I was like, why? I wonder why they didn't pick a famous actor. Oh, you know why they didn't do that? It's because we didn't have a lot of character beforehand to establish him. And so why make him a big actor?
That's nice. Yeah, and when I was watching it with Simon, I go, Simon, do you recognize her? And then he goes, what? And there's that one scene where she's trying to seduce the guys at the, before she does the dance fighting, tries to seduce. She goes, hey guys, and he goes, oh, Nebula, and he recognized her from her voice in that moment.
That's pretty cool.
Because I recognized it, and I go, buddy, do you recognize her? And he goes, what? And I rewound it, and she did the voice again, and he goes, oh my god! And so yeah, it was a wonderful moment. My son gets it. He gets films in a lot of ways, and it's pretty cool to watch him. Like we were last night we watched another movie. We watched Wonder, and he called out some things or whatever, and why he thought something was good and why he thought something could have been done differently or whatever. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. But yeah, he recognized her, and I thought that was wonderful.
That's so good.
Yeah.
So I'll dive through a few notes and along the way, like we'll go into tangents, I'm sure. And so cinematography wise, I love, you get to the end of the film, everything is in the daylight until you get to the big dramatic climax. And that mostly happens at night. And I love that. And they shoot night for night. I can imagine it's really tempting to shoot that kind of moment day for night. For a lot of reasons, you can move faster. Night shoots are hell. Like you're suddenly upending your entire sleep schedule so that you can maximize being on set at night. You're waking up at 2 p.m. and going to bed at 5 a.m. Maybe. But it makes sense. Like shooting at night is super expensive. It requires so much more lighting and rigging than day for night does. But the payoff is so good because you get so much more contrast. The shadows are deep and nearly crushed. Sometimes they are crushed. In this film, they do crush those shadows so that, you can't really see into the shadow, which is good for a reason I'll get to in a second. But just overall, shooting night for night adds so much more atmosphere to your film because it's easier to add visual interest. Now you can add lightning flashes and you can mix that with the torch lighting. And I love that because it's adding horror elements. You can hide, things. Jaguars are hidden in the frame so that they can be revealed through a lightning, flash, or they're creeping out of the shadows. Things that you cannot really do when you're doing day for night. And just that pure visual contrast is such a nice heightening aspect of this film because of how much time you spend in the day. When suddenly you're restricting visual information through shadow, it adds a new layer of tension, visual tension to the film that you just haven't had through, the first hour and 30 minutes. Like suddenly oh, what's going to happen now? We don't know. We're out of our comfort zone. It's pretty cool. And
that's awesome.
When you're doing that, of course, now it's really important to add catch lights into the eyes. Catch lights are those little tiny pinpricks of specular highlight on someone's eyes. And you need that so much more. I wasn't paying attention to any of that. Maybe they had them in the daylight scenes. Maybe they didn't. I honestly couldn't tell you. But I noticed it hardcore in the night scenes just because you really need that or you're going to lose the emotion and connection with the characters at that point. And so that's just a lot of extra stuff that you have to do, and it's so worth it. You get so much out of it, I think. But you got to pick those moments depending on your story. And this is not an obvious story to do that. Like, I think it's really easy to go the other direction. But great job in cinematography and directing for sure. The meat of what I really want to touch on, man, is the story and writing. The physical comedy, great. Body humor is awesome, but really tricky to do in modern times because whatever, in the 80s, it was just like really base fat jokes. Like, oh, there's a big person, we're going to, point and laugh. And it's just, it wasn't really well done and it just wasn't very funny in the first place. And so whenever you think body humor, that's where people tend to want to go. But here, they do a really great job of walking that tightrope because you're punching down at Jack Black. but they don't punch down so much at him for being whatever, a little overweight and out of shape. It's more of just the sheer contrast of a woman finding herself in a man's body. And so they allow Jack Black to be himself, right? In one sense, because he's, of everyone in this movie, he is the most comfortable in his body. I don't care. You can talk about The Rock all day long, but he is not more comfortable in his body than Jack Black is. I guarantee you. Like, Jack Black just loves himself, and we all love him for that. And it's so good. And so they do that. They allow him to use himself in his physical comedy while punching up at everyone else, right? Suddenly, The Rock we're pretending that he is not used to being The Rock. And we have that buy-in through Spencer. And it's so fun to watch him kind of like look at his biceps and be like, whoa, like, oh, that's nice. Oh, this nice, enormous left pec. Like, those are really fun things. And they also don't use Karen Gillan's like sexuality in a really negative connotation. It's punching up. It's like the actor is trying to cover up. And even though her character in the video game, it has a sexual tone to it, we're not using that in a kind of gross way. This is a family comedy. There's no reason to take that. And so the character that they put in that body is one who is also not comfortable in her own body. And that's used, all of this is used as part of their character arcs. And that's so good. And I'm certainly going to be talking about that here in 1 second. Where did I freaking leave off? I have so many notes and they're going to go so freaking fast. Yeah, so The Rock, the other aspect of the physical comedy is just something that we kind of touched on a little bit a minute ago. Like The Rock doing his silly run whenever he's still discovering his body, right? And he suddenly realizes he can run really fast. And it's nice. It's such a clever use of video game idea to show him running really fast, but yet he's not really trying to run very fast. Like, it's him kind of short pumping his arms, but the parallax that's happening behind him is like lightning fast. And then there's that sheer sense of joy that crosses his face as he realizes, I'm running fast. And he's just kind of pumping his arms. Like, that's funny. That's really great use of like silliness and physical comedy to make the audience laugh. Like, it's combining everything in the story.
I have to add to that, because one of the funniest parts of this movie for me is Kevin Hart trying to run with that backpack and everyone, including Jack Black, passing him. And when we first watched it, me and my kids, we all, when they were first running away from, I guess they were running away from the motorcyclists as they come over the hill.
Yep.
And he's running, he's got this huge backpack on, and they're ahead of The Rock, and The Rock flies by him, and that's funny. But then Bethany flies by, the Jack Black just flies by him.
Her form is freaking going.
Yeah, she just and flies by Kevin Hart. He's like, what's going on? Because he's supposed to be Fridge, and he's used to going fast, because he's a jock, but he can't run at all. And Kevin Hart, even thinking about it makes me laugh so hard. It's just fantastic. Yeah. So anyway, that's a hilarious part of the movie.
So good. The other thing that I really like, and this is a part of the exposition, like we talked about the cutscene a minute ago, but the other thing they really do nicely is demonstrations for the audience of how things operate in this world, whether it's letting two people die and then showing their tattoos, right, markings disappearing, like, oh, like that's a nice, easy demonstration of we have three lives in this world. And then, because every story is its own universe with its own operating rules, and demonstrations are a form of exposition to let us know what those rules are, right? And so one of those other things that they do is we see that the Fridge dies with the stone, with the Jaguar stone. And then whenever he respawns, he still has the stone, right? That's very important for the story. So we need to demonstrate that ahead of time before it's actually needed. And that, is how we know when Martha dies at the end with the stone, right? She gets the venom shot. We know that she's going to keep it in her inventory. We're not surprised. We're not taking out of that story beat. we're right there with her. We see what idea she's starting to formulate because they visually very quickly and very efficiently, she looks up, sees the jaguar, she looks down, sees the venom, she looks at Van Pelt, the villain, and she kills herself. Like it's this very bang, bang, bang kind of moment, disappears, and we're like, oh, and it's happening so fast visually that we're trying to catch up with her so that by the time she's falling through the sky, we are there with her. We've caught up. Like it's a great, method of demonstrating early on in the film, but not so far ahead of time that you forget it by the time it's needed. Like that's a delicate balance in the writing and directing.
And also to set it up with the scene that you showed of everybody's strengths and weaknesses. Why would her weakness be venom if we never see that as her action, like something that affects her, right? It's like loading the gun and not seeing it go off. Like we have to see that, just like we see, you can't have this like a weird weakness and it not be seen. Like cake, we need to see what happens if Fridge eats cake, and we do, soon after. But it's a great point, yeah.
100%. And the nice thing about the venom aspect is when she approaches a snake, that whole snake pit, like we're afraid for her because we're suddenly like, oh no, venom. We know she will die if she gets bit. And to turn that from a weakness to an asset is a really great writing. Like it's something every writer should be trying to do, of using a character's weaknesses and turning it into a strength, especially in an adventure movie. I mean, come on. And it's just a brilliant, turn of a story element. The other kind of demonstration that they do is seeing the villain kill his henchman via the bug, right? The scorpion crawls out of his mouth. Like throughout that whole cutaway, to Van Pelt, we're always seeing him use these bugs, and they're crawling around and in and out of his ears and weird stuff. Like we need to see those moments and demonstrate that he has power over the animals. One, to give him weight. Like we want the stakes to be really big whenever he pops up. So the more you can do those kind of things, the better. But it also kind of cues us into Martha's danger whenever he shows up, because she's surrounded by those docile snakes, and then they all start raising their head. And we suddenly start like, what are they doing? Oh no, the villain's nearby. And then he steps into frame. Like that's a really great use of demonstrating what a villain can do, what their powers are, how that's going to endanger, our heroes. And then having that, you want smart heroes, you want smart villains, but smarter heroes. Like it's so great to have a villain that you're really afraid of because of how powerful they are, and then a hero that can turn that against them. Like that's so cool to feel like all hope is lost. What do we do now? We're stuck. We're trapped. And then finding a way out of it. That's the beauty of great writing, which is his, of course. And the last bit of exposition that I really liked was the double reverse refrigerator. The play that he runs at the end of the film. It's a tricky line to walk because it gets really close into violating what I call the rule of repeats, where if you tell us a plan, something has to go wrong. Or you don't tell us the plan, and then we get surprised by what happens. They're going for that second one because he kind of halfway lays out the plan to get us oriented, but not so much that he's not saving details for the actual execution. Let us find surprises along the way, because if you just tell us exactly what you're going to do and then you do it, we're bored. But if you kind of let us in and then we think it's going wrong, but actually they save some details for what the actual plan is, that's exciting, that's a surprise, and that's a story worth following along and engaging with. Okay, the part that I'm really excited about are the characters. Characters, contrast, and growth. All their arcs are freaking great. They're so simple. And you know what? Sometimes simple is the best. The characters are facing their weaknesses, and through the game, they have to grow in order to beat it. Cool. Each character is set up with incredible contrast to who they become in the game, and they all learn to grow into their characters. And because of how on the nose their introductions are in the beginning of the film, it's really easy to identify who's whom throughout the entire film. Like we never lose track of Spencer's personality traits, right? Because this is the guy who wears a raincoat in nice weather and who jumps at squirrels. And so you give us a really weak opening so that he can really have an opportunity to grow into strength. And they use very, very strong archetypes, right? We got the jock, we got the video game nerd, we got the hot girl, we got the feminist strong nerd girl. Like, they're all highly understood tropes, so that, again, it becomes very easy to contrast them with the players that they inhabit. This is just simple but highly intelligent, because it's, to a certain degree, becomes counterintuitive. You might think, I need to break, normalities and make it more interesting than that, when you actually don't. You're telling an action adventure comedy. Use all of that to your strength. And they do. And so what I love is that, so we'll just touch on each character, introduction keys us right into who they are, which is super efficient. Spencer is the gamer, scared of his own shadow. Fridge is the jock who doesn't do his own homework, right? He doesn't like intelligence. Bethany, right, is fabricating this picture-perfect life for Instagram and is a popular kid, which she has more hiding under the surface we'll get to. Martha refuses to play sports on grounds of practicality and life goals. Like, you understand everyone immediately, and that's why in 15 minutes they can jump straight into the video game, and the payoffs are amazing. Martha has to gain confidence in herself and embrace her feminine side. Even that clip that we played, whenever they're all doing their character strengths and weaknesses, like, she doesn't want to touch her boob in front of everyone, so she kind of just hides. That's a part of her character. It's not just, oh, that's kind of gross. It's her character is to, I don't want to demonstrate any level of sexuality or femininity of any kind. Like, stop looking at me like that. And so she kind of hides. That's built into her character. It's not just a funny gag. It's actually a part of her actual character. Spencer, of course, has to gain confidence and embrace his masculinity, something that he is very uncomfortable with in reality. Bethany has to embrace her intelligence and find more in herself beyond sexuality and superficiality. Her boyfriend really likes skin, and that's kind of a thing with her, right? And she makes a joke about, I wore a bikini to school one day, and I got sent home. And of course, Martha is judging her for it, and those character dynamics are just constantly being reinforced throughout them as characters in the video game. It's not enough to just put them in these bodies. You have to reinforce they're still trying to grow into those bodies. And so it's really, really well done there, of course.
And they have a moment where Bethany and Martha have that moment where they talk. She's like, all you do is judge me. Because at the beginning of the film, and I literally said it out loud when I was watching it with my son. I was like, oh, I do not like this character at all. She's doing staging the Instagram selfie and stuff like that. Like, oh my gosh. And he was like, yeah, not at all. But then you love her as Jack Black. And so the whole Martha is judging her, yes. I mean, this is just how she is. She doesn't need Martha also saying how she's, like giving her all of the reasons why she's like terrible. So they have that moment where they actually can talk to each other about, what the other thinks of the other and kind of say, okay, we're just going to let it all go, now. So
100%. And the other interesting thing about Bethany is that she in classes doing a video conference call with her friend, FaceTiming, and what it kind of gets glossed over is that she finished her quiz first in her class. Like, I think the worst way to read that is she just phoned it in. But in actuality, I think she probably is actually very smart, and she literally finished ahead of everyone. She is intelligent. She just doesn't want to display that. She'd rather is more comfortable displaying, the popularity side of skin in order to achieve what she wants, which is, a social life.
Great point.
She also manages in her story, right, to connect with someone, Alex, that isn't purely based on the physical, because she can't rely on her body anymore to attract someone. She has to engage some other way, maybe like selflessness. Interesting, because that's a hurdle for her. The teacher at the beginning literally says, let's back up a moment. You do know there are other people in the world other than you. And so that's a nice obstacle for her to cross. And then, of course, the fridge has to learn how to follow and be supportive and appreciate intelligence. That's a different way of operating for him. And at the end of the movie, he has to defeat an elephant through intelligence and inaction, not brawn. He literally just has to stand there and do nothing. And for him, that's been a challenge this whole time because he's so used to being the fridge. And what a great naming convention, because that can be a little tricky to demonstrate in a body like Kevin Hart's, where he can't really do fridge-like things. Well, you know what? Let's just name him the fridge, and then we get it. We get who this guy is. And it's a corny name, but very, very smart in terms of reinforcing his character type. The other thing that I love that they do for character is the use of their 3 lives. It's a great use of like the death in order to reveal character and wit. So Bethany, for instance, sacrifices a life to save someone else. For her, this is growth, right? She's finally thinking of others. The fridge kills Spencer after being called dumb, which reveals his insecurity and why he values football so much. It's something he's good at. And it's also showing how little he values other people. He's very selfish. So that's a reinforcement of he needs to figure out how to be supportive and inclusive. Martha takes a venom bite, right? She uses her intelligence and then has to play a game of catch to save everyone's life. The thing that she didn't want to do at the beginning is the thing that's saving everyone at the end of the film. Spencer has to sacrifice the fridge to achieve a goal. He has to embrace that kind of alpha aspect of his personality, which is a whole dumb thing. I don't want to get into like alpha beta like stupidity, but I think that's what they're leaning into. He has to embrace selfishness and danger in order to grow into being a leader. It's okay, as a leader sometimes to get other people to do something that's there for the greater good of achieving everyone's goals. And of course, Spencer's real test of growth is what he chooses to do when he's on his last life, right? And it's funny, I started writing this, and literally as I'm writing it, the character starts saying verbatim what I'm writing. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. It's a lot easier to be brave when you have lives to spare. It's a lot harder when you only have one life. Because he was super brave whenever he had, 2 spare lives, but then suddenly that jaguar eats his face off and he gets respawned, and suddenly he's like, I'm on my last life. Wait, now everything counts. The stakes have been raised. Do I still have it in me to do this? What a great use of 3 lives. Because otherwise, of course, it's easy to be the Rock in a video game. There's no stakes. Like I can jump across cliffs or whatever else. But suddenly when it's like, oh, I might actually die now. Do I still have it in me to be a hero? Let's find out. Great use of the 3 life, trope to reveal character growth, stakes, and also their wit and intelligence. Like just really smart stuff. The last thing that I had was the bad first kiss. The Rock and Karen Gillan do such a fun job of performing that little bad kiss. But it's a really important performance because Spencer and Martha are having their first kiss, and it's so god awfully bad, and they realize it, and they're like, that doesn't count kind of thing. And then they go into have a real kiss, and you can see they're actually going to do a really nice first kiss, and they get interrupted, right? Fridge shows up. He's like, whoa, I don't want to see that. While you guys were doing a thing, I did the thing that we all really need, which is find the jaguar. And I love that little moment because it's great for comedic effect. It's so silly, and we've seen it 1,000 times in 1,000 movies, and it still works. It's what's funny is funny, and it's physical comedy. But what I love about it too is it also doesn't feel like a real first kiss. And so they're saving stakes for the end of the film when they're in real life. Now we can actually watch him. Hey, this is it. Do I got what it takes? Middle of school, in front of everyone, he goes and gets the real first kiss. We saved it for the end. We got a fake first kiss for comedy. We got the real first kiss for the end of the film. And it's mere 20 seconds before you cut to black. great job. Like, what a smart use of comedy to save the drama. Yeah, dude, this is
Great point.
a brilliant film. I really, truly mean that. And I haven't rewatched the original Jumanji, but I think it's probably better than the original Jumanji.
And I want to say I'm really glad that you think that, because, I mean, you know, it's really easy for any one of maybe, you know, 100 decisions that were, every 100 decisions that were made on this film, which there were thousands, made incorrectly, could have ruined this entire movie. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
There's so much that could go wrong in doing this, and the direction, everything from the direction and the acting to the writing and the editing, which I want to point out is like very important, not just in a movie like this, but in a comedy, right? Timing is everything, is in comedy. And that includes how long you hang on somebody after they've delivered a line, the reaction that you see from someone else, who you're cutting to, after a line is delivered, all of that stuff, like the position of the camera, you know, are we close? Are we far? Are we wide? Do we see two people, one person? What's in the background? What's happening? You know, do we see a flicker of a candle in the background or something? Or is it nothing? You know, like all of these things are super, super important in this particular type of film, and they all have to go right. And it just did. Like, they knocked it out of the park. I'm so glad that you liked it too, because I love this movie for all of those reasons, and it just hits for me, and the rewatchability of it too. Like you said, you know, the first time you watched it again, you know, you were kind of, it took a while for you to get into it, I guess. What was it that you said? Like maybe
the very first time I watched it, I was not into it until they got into the video game. The second time, which was the first time being whatever 4 years ago, and then the second time because I knew I enjoyed this movie, in it from the beginning.
Cool. Yeah. And then the payoff at the end, man, where you think that, okay, everything is good, you know, and what's his name gets back and it's 20 years later, and okay, they go and they find him, and like learning that he has had his whole life, like I said it earlier, is just such the icing on the cake. Because you love his character and you feel bad for him. He's been trapped here for 20 years. And it's almost like, I think part of the reason I got emotional watching that is because I felt like that's what I wanted for Robin Williams' character in the original. You know, felt so bad for that guy, and you just wanted it to be like that. And then they just say, you know what? We're going to make it like that. We're going to give this guy, I'm bad with names. We're going to give Alex that Alan didn't get. So anyway, everything about this movie is just fantastic. Even the slapstick stuff and the kind of like crazy stuff, because it's a video game. So I'm really glad that you liked it that much, man.
Dude, and I'm curious how many cameras they use, because you have so many people on set, and comedy is so much about timing, like you said, that you want to make sure you're getting takes that match in post. And so I wouldn't be surprised if some of these scenes, they're running 4 cameras, making sure this single. You have 4 leads in one scene together, getting singles. Let's break out all 4 cameras and get everything. I mean, it could also just be a 2-camera setup. There's no way they did less than 2 cameras. But I wouldn't be surprised if it was 4 cameras. I might just look that up because I'm just really, really curious. But yeah, genius writing, great execution. Yeah, I'm here for the sequels. Like, there's no way, it's just impossible. The sequel can't be as good as this one, because if you bring in all these same characters, you've hit all the best beats. And so now you're just trying to rehash the same beats, and the law of diminishing returns kicks in. Doesn't matter. I'm still going to watch them. Like, I want it. And I think they have another one, like a third one with these characters coming up or something.
They have to. The second one sets it up.
God. Oh, it does. Yeah, okay.
It does.
I need to go rewatch the second one then.
Yeah.
Nice. What, I think that wraps it up. What are you going to recommend this week, man?
This week, and I think we talked about that I started watching this, and I'm just in love with it. I'm going to recommend The Boys on Amazon Prime Video. I am totally enthralled in this show now. I'm way behind. I know we're on season 4 4 is coming. I don't know. Is it coming? Okay. I don't know.
Yeah. It's
but,
like a few weeks away.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I just got through season 1. I'm just now starting season 2, and I'm absolutely in love with it, to the point where I was telling my wife about it, trying to explain what this world is. Imagine if superheroes weren't good people and they were all over the place. What would that world be like? And I mean, the writing is fantastic. The setups are amazing. The acting is so good. It's hilarious and yet brutal at the same time in every way. No one is safe. Not at all. That's how I feel. I feel like no one is safe and anybody could die at any time pretty much, at least in this first season. And I love it. I'm so in love with it. So yeah, The Boys.
Nice. Ditto. I'm going to recommend another story that has this kind of layered approach, and it's the NeverEnding Story. It's from the 80s. If you're from the younger generation, maybe you haven't seen this before, and maybe you're lightly aware of it because some of the imagery is just iconic. There's no way you haven't seen the Luck Dragon with Sebastian writing on top. But highly recommend it. I haven't watched it in ages. I say that, and it's like, but I just know it holds up. I know in my heart this thing holds up. And so the NeverEnding Story is about a lonely kid who reads a book, and the book in his mind comes to life, and which is the beauty of storytelling and stories. And so yeah, go check out the NeverEnding Story. It's got to be streaming somewhere, probably on Disney. I don't know. Yeah, and stay tuned for next week. We're going to go across the seas and see what that big lizard Godzilla's up to. And Godzilla -1. I think it's streaming on Netflix now. And why not? It should be an interesting conversation. And if you're... I forget what I say here, but don't forget, drop us a review, leave us a note, subscribe. I just blanked out.
It's all right.
And if you want to comment on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/Jumanji. Welcome to the jungle.
All one word.
All one.
And today's quote of the day is from the late, great Robin Williams. Being in the same room with people and creating something together is a good thing. Simple, to the point, accurate.
That's the beauty of games. You know, I don't think we talk about that a lot on the show, but games are a really ancient way of bringing a community together. Like, this is not like, oh, we discovered whatever soccer, 150 years ago or whatever. Like, we've been playing games for thousands and thousands of years, and it's such a unique way to build relationships and to build, community through trust and negotiation, compromise. Like, all of that is kind of built into games. And without that aspect, it's much harder to have culture in society. And it's such a simple, silly thing to say out loud. And I love that at the end of this movie, they're all friends. They're all friends. They're hanging out. They're like, planning. Yeah, I was texting her this weekend. I don't know what's the deal with you two or whatever. I'm planning on going on a hike. Like, they're friends at the end of this because they weren't friends at the beginning, but they all went through something together playing a game. Pretty cool.
And it expanded their own world view. Bethany, who would never go on a hike before, or it now is doing that kind of thing and feels comfortable because she put herself into a position that she is not used to. And it was forced upon her, and she had to survive. And now all of a sudden, it's something that's become part of her as a human being, even though it was part of a game. You know what I mean? I don't know how game it is if you actually die, but it's pretty brutal, like Matrix has. But yeah, no, great point, and yeah, great quote. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this breakdown of Jumanji. I know I did. I absolutely loved it. I'm really glad that you loved it too, Wes. Hopefully you guys got something out of it. Like Wes said earlier, please subscribe, review us wherever you can. And if there's a film you'd like to see us pick apart and talk about, please let us know. Maybe we'll do it. Until next time, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.